The blood on Jimin's sleeve should have made him stop smiling, but he stood under the flickering hallway light with that same soft curve on his lips, as if the crimson soaking into his cuff belonged to someone else. Jungkook froze 3 steps away, breath caught somewhere between his ribs and throat, the paper cup in his hand slipping just enough for hot coffee to spill over his fingers. The sting barely registered. All he could see was Jimin, leaning against the apartment door like he had simply come home late, hair damp with rain, cheeks pale beneath the dim yellow light, and eyes carrying something too quiet to name. "You're bleeding," Jungkook said. Jimin glanced lazily at his sleeve, then back at him, smiling wider as if Jungkook had pointed out a wrinkle in his shirt instead of blood. "It's not mine." That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Rain hissed against the old apartment windows. Somewhere downstairs, a dog barked once and fell silent. The hallway smelled like wet concrete, cheap detergent, and iron, sharp and metallic, thick enough now that Jungkook could taste it on the back of his tongue. Jimin pushed himself off the wall and stepped inside before Jungkook could say another word. He moved carefully, too carefully, one hand trailing along the edge of the shoe cabinet as though the floor beneath him tilted in ways only he could feel. Jungkook shut the door behind them and stood there for half a second, pulse hammering in his ears. Jimin toed off his shoes with practiced ease, peeling out of his coat and draping it over the back of a chair. The motion was graceful, familiar, almost absurdly ordinary. A line of dark red gleamed across his knuckles before disappearing beneath the sleeve of his sweater. Jungkook stared at it. Jimin looked over his shoulder. "Don't." The word landed quietly, but it carried enough weight to stop Jungkook cold. Jimin walked past him into the kitchen, turning on the faucet. Water rushed into the silence. Jungkook followed, jaw tight, watching pink spiral down the drain as Jimin held his hands under the stream. Blood loosened from his skin in thin ribbons, curling into the sink before vanishing. "Not mine." Jungkook braced both hands against the counter. "Then whose?" Jimin's shoulders rose and fell once. He did not answer. The kitchen light was too bright. It carved sharp shadows under Jimin's eyes, made his skin look translucent. There was rain caught in his lashes. His hair clung damply to his forehead. He looked like a man returning from war dressed in the softness of someone trying to pass as harmless. Jungkook had known Jimin long enough to recognize all the ways he lied. Jimin lied with silence before words ever had the chance. He lied with smiles that came too quickly and eyes that lingered too long on anything but the truth. He lied by making himself smaller, softer, easier to believe. And tonight he was smiling like none of this mattered. That frightened Jungkook more than the blood. Jimin dried his hands, folding the stained towel neatly over the counter as if the act itself could restore order. "You're home early." Jungkook laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You came home covered in blood." Leaned back against the sink, crossing his arms over his chest. "And yet somehow you're the one who sounds upset." Stared at him. For one disorienting second, anger flashed hot enough to burn through the fear. "Are you serious?" Jimin's smile softened, but it didn't vanish. "I'm standing here, aren't I?" It was such a Jimin answer that Jungkook nearly hated him for it. 3 years. 3 years of learning the shape of Jimin's silences, the exact angle of his smile when he was exhausted, the way he curled his fingers into his sleeves when he was anxious, the way he hummed under his breath when he thought no one was listening. 3 years of piecing together a man who offered himself in fragments and called it enough. Jungkook had learned to live with Jimin's mysteries the way people learn to live beside old wounds, carefully and without pressing too hard. But tonight there was blood in his sink. Jungkook stepped closer. "Take off the sweater." Jimin's gaze sharpened. "Jungkook, take it off." For a moment neither of them moved, then Jimin exhaled, almost amused, and reached for the hem. The sweater came off slowly, dragging over pale skin and lean muscle and the elegant lines of a body Jungkook knew too well. It also revealed the bruise blooming dark along Jimin's ribs, the split skin at his side, the angry cut just above his hip where blood had dried in rust-colored streaks. Jungkook's stomach dropped. The room narrowed to the shape of that wound. Jimin folded the sweater with absurd precision and set it on the counter. Jungkook could barely hear his own voice. "What happened?" Jimin tilted his head. "You'll make tea first." Looked at him in disbelief. Jimin's mouth curved again, gentler this time but no less evasive. "You always think better when your hands are busy." It was that impossible calm, that infuriating tenderness. Jungkook wanted to shake him, wanted to demand names, explanations, the truth dragged bleeding into the light. Instead, because Jimin was bleeding and pale and still somehow looking at him like this was manageable, Jungkook turned toward the kettle with hands that did not feel entirely his own. The click of the burner sounded too loud. Behind him, Jimin slid onto one of the kitchen stools with a soft breath, more felt than heard. Jungkook filled the kettle, set out the tea leaves, grabbed the first aid kit from the top shelf. His movements were sharp, efficient, furious in their precision. Every metallic clink of scissors and every rustle of gauze sharpened the silence between them. When he turned back, Jimin was watching him with that unreadable expression Jungkook hated most, the one that looked too much like affection and too little like honesty. "Who did this to you?" Jimin rested one elbow on the counter and propped his cheek against his hand. "You ask questions like you expect answers. Set the first aid kit down harder than necessary. And you smile like that's supposed to make me stop asking." Something flickered across Jimin's face then. Quick, barely there, not amusement, not annoyance, fatigue. It hollowed him all at once, slipping through the cracks in his performance so fast Jungkook almost missed it. The smile remained, but it looked thinner now. Fragile, held in place by force. Jungkook saw it and understood with a cold certainty that made his chest tighten that Jimin was not smiling because he was fine. Jimin was smiling because if he stopped, something underneath it might break open. The realization knocked the anger out of Jungkook so suddenly it left only fear behind. He moved in front of Jimin and crouched, hands gentler now as he pressed clean gauze to the cut at his side. Jimin flinched, small, involuntary but real. Jungkook looked up. Jimin's jaw had gone tight. His breath caught so faintly most people would have missed it. Jungkook did not. "Who hurt you?" he asked again, quieter this time. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Steam began to whisper from the kettle. Somewhere in the building, pipes groaned in the walls, and then Jimin lifted one hand and touched Jungkook's wrist with blood-cold fingers. His smile was still there, but his eyes were not smiling at all. "I did," Jimin said. Jungkook stopped breathing. The words did not make sense at first. They landed between them like something dropped into deep water, heard, but not yet understood. Jungkook's fingers remained pressed to the gauze at Jimin's side, his hands suspended in place as if movement itself might force the sentence into meaning. "I did," Jimin repeated, softer this time, watching him with eyes too steady for someone sitting half-bloodied under a kitchen light. Steam hissed from the kettle. Jungkook stared at him, waiting for the explanation that never came. Jimin's hand slipped from Jungkook's wrist and returned to his lap. Calmly, almost absently, he folded his fingers together as though they were discussing weather, not blood and bruises, and the kind of sentence that left a cold crack splitting straight through Jungkook's chest. "You did what?" Jimin's gaze drifted to the window. Rain streaked the glass in silver lines, blurring the city lights beyond into soft, trembling halos. "I made a mistake." Jungkook stood so abruptly the stool legs scraped against tile. "That is not an answer." Jimin closed his eyes for one brief second, as if the sound had struck somewhere behind them. When he opened them again, the smile had returned, smaller now, tired enough to look painful. "It's the only one I have tonight." Kettle shrieked. The sound cut through the room so sharply Jungkook flinched. He turned the burner off with more force than necessary, the metal clicking beneath his hand. Steam curled into the air between them, warm and ghost-like, carrying the bitter green scent of tea leaves and something sharper underneath. Iodine, blood, rain still clinging to Jimin's skin. Jungkook poured the water because his hands needed something to do that was not shaking him. His pulse had turned vicious. Fast. Restless. He could feel it in his throat, his wrists, behind his eyes. Every instinct in him was split between grabbing Jimin by the shoulders and demanding the truth until it cracked loose, or saying nothing at all because some quiet animal part of him had begun to understand that whatever had happened tonight was larger than a cut in Jimin's side and a lie in his mouth. Jimin accepted the tea when Jungkook set it in front of him. He wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the steam gather against his face. For a moment he looked almost unbearably young, damp hair falling over his forehead, sweaterless and bruised under the harsh kitchen light, bare shoulders drawn tight against the cold. Not fragile. Jimin had never been fragile. But there was something worn in him tonight. Something thin to transparency. Jungkook sat across from him and began cleaning the wound in silence. Jimin did not protest this time. The cut was shallow but ugly, more torn than sliced, the edges raw and angry. Not an accident. Not clumsy. Jungkook's jaw tightened as he worked antiseptic into the skin. Jimin hissed through his teeth. Hold still. Stings. It's supposed to. Gave a breath that might have been a laugh. Jungkook hated that it made his chest ache. He taped fresh gauze over the wound, then looked up at the bruise spreading dark beneath Jimin's ribs. It was already deepening, violet swallowing yellow in uneven shadows. A handprint maybe, or a body meeting something harder than bone. Jungkook touched the edge of it, feather-light. Jimin's breath caught there. Again, not fear, not exactly pain, yes, but something else tangled beneath it, something tighter, older. Jungkook lifted his hand. You said you did this, stared into his tea. I said I made a mistake. You came home bleeding. Yes, you have someone else's blood on your sleeve. Said nothing. Jungkook's voice sharpened. And you expect me to believe this ends at a mistake? Jimin's gaze flicked up. There it was again. That strange stillness in him, that way he seemed to fold into silence so completely it became a kind of armor. Jungkook had seen it before, though never like this. In crowded rooms, in interviews. In the quiet moments after nightmares, Jimin always claimed he couldn't remember. It was not emptiness, it was control. And tonight it was slipping. Jimin set the mug down with deliberate care. Do you remember what you told me the first winter we lived here? Jungkook blinked, caught off guard by the shift. What? Jimin leaned back slightly, eyes tracing the cracked edge of the ceiling as if the memory were written there. The heat was out. We were wearing 3 layers and pretending it was romantic. Everything, the image hit Jungkook with painful clarity. Frost on the inside of the windows, 2 blankets stolen from the couch. Jimin curled against him with freezing hands and an expression of profound betrayal toward the landlord. You said, Jimin continued, voice quieter now, whatever it is, you can tell me when it becomes too heavy to carry alone. Jungkook's throat tightened. He remembered. He had said it half asleep, face buried in Jimin's hair, meaning only to soothe whatever unnamed sorrow had kept Jimin awake that night. Jimin had gone very still in his arms after that. He had not answered. Jungkook had assumed he'd fallen asleep now under the sterile kitchen light. Jimin's mouth curved faintly around the memory. I almost did, he said. Something cold moved under Jungkook's skin. Jimin looked at him then fully. No deflection, no practiced softness. Just that gaze, dark, exhausted, and so direct it felt like being pinned in place. There are things about me, Jimin said, that only stay harmless as long as no one looks at them too closely. Jungkook felt his pulse thud once, hard enough to hurt. What does that mean? Jimin's smile returned, but this time it was different, not warm, not evasive, resigned. It means I need you to do something difficult tonight. Jungkook's body went still. Jimin reached into the pocket of his discarded coat. Jungkook's muscles locked before thought could catch up. Jimin pulled out a small silver key slick with rainwater and dried blood and set it gently on the table between them. The sound it made against the wood was almost delicate. Jungkook stared at it. There's a storage unit at Hanel Station, Jimin said. Platform level. Locker 117. Jungkook looked from the key to Jimin's face. What is this? If I'm not here by morning, Jimin said. You take that key, open the locker and burn everything inside without reading any of it. The room went silent enough for Jungkook to hear the rain slide down the windows. He stared at Jimin. Certain he had misheard him. Then he laughed once, disbelieving, breathless, wrong. No, did not move. Jungkook. No, to me. No. The word came sharper this time, cracking at the edges. Jungkook shoved back from the table so hard the chair legs screeched. No, absolutely not. You do not get to walk in here bleeding and hand me a key and speak in riddles like what? Like you're leaving. The words tore out of him louder than he intended. Both of them froze. Jimin's face changed. It was small, almost imperceptible, but Jungkook saw it. The slight stillness in his mouth, the flicker in his eyes, something pained and unguarded opening there before Jimin pulled it back under. Too late, Jungkook had seen it. And suddenly the fear he had been holding at arm's length all night took shape, clean and brutal. This was not just blood. This was goodbye with the edges still hidden. Jungkook's voice dropped, rougher now. "What did you do?" Jimin looked down at the key between them. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet Jungkook had to lean in to hear it. "Something I should have done years ago." Jungkook felt the floor tilt. Rain tapped the windows in soft, relentless rhythm. The tea had gone untouched. The kitchen light buzzed overhead like a dying thing. And in that too-bright room, with dried blood under Jimin's nails and a silver key between them like a loaded gun, Jungkook understood with sudden, terrible clarity that whatever Jimin had been hiding had not started tonight. Tonight was only the first time it had followed him home.
Jungkook did not realize he was gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles began to ache. The key lay between them, small and silver and obscene in its simplicity, catching the kitchen light each time the rain shifted against the window. Locker 117. Burn everything inside. Don't read it. Jimin had said it with the same voice he used to ask if Jungkook wanted tea, as if what he had placed on the table was not a threat dressed like trust. Jungkook stared at him, trying to find the seam in this moment where it could still be turned into something ordinary. A misunderstanding. A badly timed joke. Another one of Jimin's maddening half-truths spun too far, but Jimin was no longer smiling. The absence of it altered him more than Jungkook expected. Without that careful softness arranged across his mouth, Jimin looked stripped down to something sharper and more dangerous. The sweetness people trusted so easily had vanished. What remained was harder to name. Not cruelty, not coldness, just someone very tired of pretending to be harmless. Jungkook's voice came out low. "Who are you?" The question landed with a quiet force that seemed to settle into the room itself. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the apartment above them, footsteps crossed a floor and faded. Then Jimin leaned back in his chair and said, "That depends on which part of me you've been loving." The words hit harder than Jungkook was prepared for, not because of what they implied. Because of how gently Jimin said them, Jungkook's throat tightened so fast it hurt. 3 years folded in on themselves all at once. Winter mornings with Jimin half asleep and impossible to wake. The smell of soap and tea clinging to his sweaters. The way he always checked the lock twice before bed. The way he hated sirens. The way his smile sharpened at the sound of glass breaking. The way he could identify footsteps in a hallway without looking up. 100 details. Small. Strange. Forgettable if taken alone. Together, they rearranged themselves into something else. Jungkook straightened slowly. "Start talking." Glanced at the clock above the stove. 11:43 p.m. The movement was small, but Jungkook saw it. Saw the way Jimin's eyes measured time like something living and hostile. Looked back at him, and for the first time since he'd come home, he seemed to make a decision. He folded his hands around the cooling mug and lowered his gaze to the steam still curling faintly from its surface. "When I was 19, he said, "I disappeared for 11 months. Jungkook went still. The sentence was so unexpected, so plain in its delivery that it took a second to settle. Jimin's mouth curved faintly, not a smile, not really. Just the shape of one remembered. "It was before you, before this apartment, before anyone who knows me now." Jungkook did not interrupt. Jimin's voice remained calm, but something in it had flattened, gone distant in a way Jungkook had only ever heard when Jimin spoke through nightmares he never remembered in the morning. There was an accident. At least that's what the papers called it. He traced one finger along the rim of the mug. A fire in Busan, warehouse district, electrical fault, 3 dead. Jungkook felt something cold settle at the base of his spine. Jimin's eyes stayed on the tea. "I was supposed to be one of them." The room seemed to narrow. Jungkook said nothing. Could not. Jimin exhaled, slow and measured. "I was in the wrong place with the wrong people. I knew things I shouldn't have known. I saw something I was never meant to see." His fingers stilled against the ceramic. "So they set the building on fire and locked the doors." Rain whispered against the windows. Jungkook could hear it too clearly. Every drop, every breath. "How did you get out?" he asked, and hated how small his voice sounded. Jimin lifted his eyes. For one terrible second, Jungkook saw it, not memory, aftermath, something old and blackened in Jimin's gaze, like smoke still trapped behind bone. "I learned," Jimin said quietly, "that survival and innocence stop being the same thing after a certain kind of night." Jungkook felt his pulse stagger. Jimin looked back down. I disappeared because the people who survived me wanted to make sure I didn't do it twice. The words should have sounded impossible. Instead, they settled into Jungkook with the awful weight of recognition. Not because he understood the details, because some part of him had always known Jimin carried something inside him with teeth. Jungkook thought of the bruises, the blood, the key. They found you tonight. Jimin's silence answered first, then softly, I found them. Stared, the rain against the windows seemed to stop, or maybe everything inside him had gone too quiet to hear it. Jimin spoke before Jungkook could. There were 4 names in that warehouse report. His voice was almost gentle now, each word laid down with terrible care. 3 were listed as dead, 1 was omitted. Jungkook's stomach turned. Man who ordered the fire is still alive. The sentence moved through Jungkook like ice water, and suddenly tonight shifted into focus. The blood on Jimin's sleeve, the torn skin at his side, the exhausted calm, the look in his eyes when he'd said, I made a mistake, not an accident, a reckoning. Jungkook heard his own voice from very far away. What did you do? Jimin met his gaze, nothing in his face moved. I went to end something. Stopped breathing. He searched Jimin's expression for shock, regret, denial, anything that would soften the shape of what those words meant. He found none, only fatigue, only that same terrible steadiness. Jungkook's hands turned cold. Did you kill him? Jimin did not answer. Jungkook stood so quickly the chair toppled backward behind him, cracking against the floor. Did you kill him? Jimin flinched this time, not at the volume, at the question. His throat moved once, then he looked away, and Jungkook understood. The realization did not come like a blade. It came like vertigo, sudden. Total, the room tilted around him, the harsh kitchen light, the smell of antiseptic and tea, rain against the windows, Jimin sitting pale and blood-stained in his chair like someone half returned from another life. Jungkook took a step back, then another. Jimin rose immediately despite the pain in his side. Jungkook! Don't. The word tore out sharper than intended. Jimin stopped. The distance between them was barely 3 feet. It felt catastrophic. Jungkook dragged a hand over his mouth, breath uneven now, pulse hammering hard enough to make his vision blur at the edges. He had imagined Jimin hurt. He had imagined Jimin hunted. He had imagined secrets, lies, old enemies, debts with teeth. He had not imagined this. He had not imagined standing in their kitchen, staring at the man he loved, and realizing there might be blood on Jimin's hands that did not wash down the sink. Jimin's voice was careful. Say something. Jungkook laughed once, a fractured sound with no humor in it at all. You tell me you disappeared into a fire at 19, spent years running from ghosts, walk into our apartment covered in blood, hand me instructions for what to do if you vanish by morning, and then ask me to say something. Jimin said nothing. Jungkook's chest rose and fell too fast. Tell me I'm wrong. Jimin's jaw tightened. Tell me, Jungkook said again, quieter now, more dangerous for it, that there isn't a man bleeding somewhere tonight because you finally decided to stop surviving him. Silence that followed was so complete it became an answer. Jungkook closed his eyes. Something inside him split, not cleanly, not all at once, but enough to leave everything raw. When he opened them again, Jimin had gone very still, not defensive, not angry, just watching him with the unbearable quiet of someone waiting to be abandoned. And that, more than anything else, nearly broke him. Because beneath the blood and the lies and the stranger suddenly standing where Jimin had always been, Jungkook could still see him, still see the man who folded laundry with impossible precision, who always gave Jungkook the warmer side of the bed, who smiled when he was hurting because he had never learned another way to survive being seen. Jungkook hated him in that moment. Jungkook loved him in that moment, and both felt equally unforgivable. Jimin did not move. He stood in the center of the kitchen with one hand braced lightly against the counter, bare shoulders pale beneath the sterile light, blood drying in dark rust at his side. He looked less like a threat than a man who had run out of places to put his grief. Jungkook hated that it made this harder. The rain had softened outside, no longer striking the windows in sharp percussion, but trailing down the glass in slow, silver threads. The city beyond them was a blur of distant headlights and wet asphalt. Somewhere below, tires hissed over slick pavement. The ordinary sounds of the world continued with brutal indifference. Inside the kitchen, everything had narrowed to the shape of silence between them. Jungkook bent, righted the fallen chair, and set it back on its legs with careful precision. The sound of wood against tile felt too loud. Then he turned and looked at Jimin again. Start from the beginning, he said, voice scraped raw. No omissions, no careful wording, no more deciding for me what I can survive hearing. Jimin's gaze held his. For a moment, Jungkook thought he might refuse. Instead, Jimin sat back down. It was not surrender. It was something quieter. Something that looked too much like trust to be comfortable. Jungkook remained standing. Jimin rested his forearms against the table and looked at his own hands for several seconds before he spoke. "Father owed money," he said. The sentence was so simple Jungkook almost missed the way Jimin's fingers tightened around each other. He was good at being charming and bad at being afraid. He borrowed from men who mistook patience for mercy. Jimin's voice was steady, but distant now, his gaze fixed somewhere past the table, past the room, past the years between then and now. By the time I understood what kind of debt he'd made, it was already ours. Jungkook said nothing. Jimin's mouth curved faintly, though there was no warmth in it. That was the first useful thing I learned. Debts are hereditary when collected by the right kind of men. He spoke as though reciting something memorized too young. Jungkook felt a slow, sickening weight gather in his chest. When I was 19, they came to collect. Jimin's eyes dropped to the cooling tea in front of him. Not money, service. The word sat between them like something rotting. Jungkook's pulse turned violent again. Jimin continued before he could speak. They moved things through the port. Cash. Names. People. Things that only remain legal when no one asks the right questions. His voice remained infuriatingly even. I was useful, quiet, easy to underestimate. Jungkook thought of Jimin at 19 and felt physically ill. Jimin, too young, too beautiful, too observant for his own safety. Jimin with that soft face people trusted and that silence people mistook for obedience. Jimin had survived because they looked at him and saw something harmless. Jungkook understood now why that realization felt like a wound. I carried messages, Jimin said. Remembered routes, memorized faces, learned when to speak and when to disappear. I learned how to smile so men twice my age stopped seeing me as a risk. Jungkook's hands curled into fists. Jimin said it like weather. Like he had long ago stripped the horror from it just to keep it survivable. And then, Jungkook asked, though his throat had gone tight around the words. Jimin was quiet for a long moment. When men like that begin to trust you, he said at last, they stop being careful in front of you. Refrigerator hummed. Rain whispered against the windows. Jimin's voice lowered. I heard a name I shouldn't have heard. A shipping manifest tied to someone important. Politicians. Police. Missing girls rooted through port storage under falsified customs reports. His jaw tightened once, almost imperceptibly. I was in the room when they realized one of the girls was still alive. Jungkook felt the blood drain from his face. Jimin's eyes did not leave the table. She was 16. The room seemed to contract around the sentence. Jungkook could not speak. I remember her because she wouldn't stop looking at me. Jimin's voice had gone very soft now, so soft Jungkook had to strain to hear it. Everyone else in that room was trying not to see her. She kept looking at me like I was supposed to do something. His fingers had gone white where they gripped each other, and I did nothing. The words landed harder than anything else he had said tonight, not because of their cruelty, because of the ruin in them. Jungkook saw it then, beneath the composure, beneath the blood and the careful calm. The oldest wound in Jimin had never been what had been done to him. It was what he had survived by not stopping. Jimin exhaled slowly through his nose. That night I stole the ledger. Jungkook's eyes snapped to his face. Jimin finally looked up. There was a book, routes, payments, names, every shipment. Every officer bought, every girl moved through that port under paperwork no one questioned. His gaze held Jungkook with unnerving steadiness. I took it and ran. Jungkook's heart kicked hard enough to hurt. The key, locker 117, burn everything inside. The fire, Jungkook said. Jimin nodded once. They locked the building and tried to erase the ledger with me in it. The girl, something flickered across Jimin's face. Brief, broken. I got one person out. Enough, he did not say it. He did not need to. The words were already in the room. Jungkook dragged in a breath that felt too thin. 11 months, he said. You disappeared for 11 months because they were hunting you. Gave the slightest nod. I sold enough of what I knew to stay alive. Enough names to make certain men very nervous. Enough evidence to disappear under someone else's protection. His expression hardened in a way Jungkook had never seen before, but not enough to end it. The years rearranged themselves all at once. Jimin's paranoia around locks, his instinctive cataloging of exits, the way he tracked strangers and reflections, the nightmares, the sirens. The smile sharpened over old fear until it passed for softness. Not quirks, survival. Jungkook sank into the chair across from him because his knees no longer trusted themselves. And tonight, Jimin looked at the key. The ledger resurfaced. Stared, Jimin reached for the silver key and turned it once between his fingers, rainwater and dried blood catching in the grooves. I thought it was gone. I made sure it was gone. His voice thinned just slightly. A week ago, someone sent me a photograph. Set the key down again. Locker 117, Hanel's station. My handwriting on the label. A chill crawled under Jungkook's skin. Someone found it. Nodded, or someone wanted me to think they had. The room felt colder now, Jungkook's gaze fixed on the key as though it might move. That's where you went tonight. Yes, to get it back. Yes, Jungkook swallowed hard. And the man, Jimin's silence stretched just long enough to become unbearable, then quietly, he was there. Jungkook's chest tightened, the man who had ordered the fire, the one Jimin had spent years surviving. The ghost at the center of all this. He recognized me, Jimin said. Older, slower, still arrogant enough to believe surviving him had made me merciful. Jungkook could hear his own pulse. What happened? Jimin's expression did not change. He had a knife. Looked at the cut in Jimin's side. Then, Jimin's eyes lifted to his. For the first time that night, his composure slipped completely, not in panic, not in anger, in something quieter and far worse. Jungkook saw guilt there, exhaustion. And beneath both, something like grief sharpened into bone. I had every intention of killing him, Jimin said. The truth entered the room without softness. Jungkook did not breathe. Jimin held his gaze and did not look away. I didn't. Jungkook stared. The silence that followed was immediate and total. Then Jimin added, almost too quietly to hear, someone else got there first.